Hi everyone, welcome back. It's Wisteria here. If you're listening on the podcast, on whichever app you prefer, thank you very much. You can find me on YouTube too with the same name, Wisteria Energy Twister, and it's in my description on this podcast anyway. But if you are, thank you very much. We're on a tale now that's called The Roaring Bull of Bagbury. There was once a farmer who lived at Bagbury Farm, in Hissington. He had a reasonable farm, but he was mean. He had to travel round all the hiring fairs in Shropshire to find enough workers, for none who knew of him would be foolish enough to work for him. Those that soon did discovered their mistake. Many did not last out their agreed 6 months, and those that did never stayed any longer. He would order the thinnest gruel and oldest leftovers to be set before the workers, while he himself would always eat of the best. The buffet was draughty and cold, but he would not hear of them taking the animals' straw to make beds. They had to make do with the cold floor. If he caught any worker stealing food, bedding or clothes, they would be flogged in the yard. His animals fared little better. They were thin, overworked. He was a cruel man, quick with his tongue and whip, slow with his ears and heart. But no one lives forever. The farmer grew old and at last took to his deathbed. As he lay fighting for each breath, he knew the end was near. Fear took hold of his heart and began to taunt him. He remembered all those he had overworked, the men who had died from ill health on his farm. Their faces reared up to haunt him. He called for a priest to make his confession, and from sundown to sunup, the farmer made a catalogue of his wrongs. The priest looked at the sick old man facing death and struggled not to show his contempt and dislike. Before he could absolve the man's sins, the farmer's face contorted and he coughed. Struggling for breath, his back arched, then he was still. When his body was buried at Hissington Church, the church and churchyard thronged with people. No one could remember when there had been so many people at a funeral. Of course, they were not actually mourners, but rather people from across the country who came to celebrate and make sure he was really dead. Though his body was buried 6 feet deep, the farmer's spirit continued to roam. A black bull appeared as soon as the sun went down, bellowing and roaring, its eyes burning like coals. The bull roared through all the streets and through Bagbury Farm. No one could sleep for fear of it. In the morning, the roads would be scarred with hoof prints, smashed gates, and the well would be fouled. Something had to be done. That Sunday, the congregation gathered and asked the priest what he was going to do to get rid of this bull beast. The priest had been expecting the question and knew that somehow he would have to exorcise the ghostly beast. Wasn't going to be easy. He sent messengers to all the neighbouring parishes until at last 11 priests came to join him. From a young man in his first post to the old blind priest who had dealt with his fair share of spirits already, so was quite confident. They gathered in Hissington Church on Sunday morning. The 12 priests knelt in a circle. Each lit a candle before them. They began to pray. They prayed all day. Slowly the sunshine disappeared and a cloud came down over the church. In the distance they heard roaring and bellowing. The spirit of the Bagbury bull was drawn into the churchyard. They kept praying and the roaring got louder. As inch by inch, step by step, the bull approached the church. The old blind priest reached down and, still praying, slipped off his boot and put his candle inside it. The doors of the church slammed open, and there stood the bull, hooves scraping the ground. It was now the size of a big dog, and praying was working. A wind swept around the church and snuffed out all the candles, except the blind priest, which he'd hidden in his boot. As the candles went out, the bull grew larger and larger. The blind priest tugged the robes of the young men beside him and sent him around with his lit candle to relight the others. He called on his brothers to pray harder. You must pray harder. The bull continued to swell in size, overshadowing the huddled priests filling the church, until the walls groaned under the pressure. There was the grating of stone on stone as the wall cracked and the mortar crumbled. Fumbling with sweating hands, the young priest finally managed to relight the 12th candle, and the bull's growth was checked. The priest took heart, and led by the strong voice of the blind priest, they began the Lord's Prayer, the strongest of all prayers. With each line the bull deflated, to the size of a stallion, then finally to an ordinary bull, a dog, a chicken, and finally a fly. The fly zoomed around the rafters of the church, trying to escape, until their prayers forced him down into a snuff box. The spirit buzzed with rage inside the snuff box. Very well, you have caught me. Now lay me under Bagbury Bridge, and ever mare that crosses over will lose her foal, and every woman her child. The priest of Hissington Church gingerly picked up the vibrating snuff-box, called for the farmhands from Bagbury. They took the farmer's own horses and set off that night for the Red Sea, to cast the snuff-box down to the depths. There, the mean spirit of Bagbury Farm shall wait until the day of judgment. The end. Very interesting tale indeed, guys. Yeah. But, as I said, the priest, the blind priest, knew what he was doing, didn't he? Well experienced. Anyway, guys, if you're on YouTube and listening to this, thank you so much for listening. I truly appreciate it. Please just tap that like button. It's completely free. Share if you can. And if you've not yet subscribed, please consider doing so. Thank you so much, and many blessings.